Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, wherever you are in the world. This is the Voice of Meaning, and I'm Ulrich Semrau, a moderator for this session. And I'm going to be talking with Neil Martin, my partner in this project, and he will be going deeper into the 8 Pillars of Contentment that we have been talking about. So, Neil, good morning. And so how would you like to begin?
Thank you, Ulrich. Good morning. For those of you who haven't seen previous sessions, the 8 Pillars of Contentment is a template. It's a structure from which we can find meaning and contentment. And in previous sessions, we talked about how this came about. Today, we're going to dive deeper into the 8 pillars, how they connect to meaning, how they connect to contentment. So I'm going to start with body. It could start with any point on that octagon. Body is our physical health. And as you can see, there's a line between that and the other pillars, which means that, in my opinion, in our opinion, that our physical health is connected to other parts of our life. Those of you who've heard about lifestyle medicine, this is where it comes about. A lifestyle medical practitioner is not going to just ask you how your body's doing, but how your body is doing in relationship with all the other areas. In future sessions, I hope to interview some lifestyle medical experts because it's a very, very fascinating area. I feel privileged because when I looked at my passport photo when we drove across the border to Canada, which was taken 4 years ago, I actually look younger and I feel younger. And that's because of focus on this body part of our existence, our being. Second is mind. Mind is our mental health. And again, mind is connected to all the other parts. We have expressions, he's out of his mind, or mindfulness. All of these are connected to mind or mindlessness. I've been mindless before. Have you, Ulrich?
Many times.
Right. But mind is...
I'm a mindful person and a mindless person. I think we all experience those.
Exactly. When I was a little kid, my mother accused me a lot of being mindless. And she was right. I was often another dimension and not present. Mind is connected to all of the other things. We had an interviewee a couple weeks ago, Tom Minch. If you haven't seen his interview, he was a teacher. He was a master teacher of 54 years. And we talked a lot about mind and how to develop one's mind. Emotion. Those are our feelings. I think we would throw love in with that. Very, very important. Without emotion, life would be very, very dry. We talk about being emotional or not emotional. Psychologists often deal with both mind and emotions, and they connect to everything. Say your body isn't working right, you might feel emotionally upset because of that. So as you see, emotion is connected to everything else. Spirit. There's two ways we can find spirituality. One is our our traditional way through religion, our relationship with God. And the second way is our relationship to things higher than ourselves, whether we believe in God or not. We've talked about awe. I have a story. I remembered when I was filling a bucket of water in the garden the other day. I was about 6 years old, and my dad took a bucket of water and he twirled it over his head, and the water didn't drop out. My eyes were wide open. I was totally amazed. And I asked, Dad, how did you do that? He said, that's called centrifugal force. And then when you're swinging the bucket, the force of the water keeps it in the bucket even though it's upside down. I was amazed. Then, of course, I went out and showed my friends how you can twirl buckets up in the air without dropping water. It was awesome. Ulrich, how about you? Do you have an awe memory?
I have lots of them. I got started in science pretty early in my life when my parents bought me my first microscope, and looking at drops of water with all the little critters inside was just amazing. And that feeling of awe, there is something just way more than just little old me. And it got me started on a whole path of discovery, which is what a lot of that sense of awe does. It gets us going into finding our passions, which then generate meaning in our lives. And again, it's like the thing, the big picture you see in front of you. It's all interconnected. You can start at any point and find the important parts of what you're talking about or thinking about.
Spirit is very, very important. Another story, many years ago when I was 19 years old, I found out that one of my best friends tried to commit suicide. He was a couple years older than me. And I went out to visit him. And I asked him, why did you do it? And he said, because I'm spiritually dead. And I thought about that, got an intuitive flash. Then I asked him, who's spiritually dead? And then he said, I told you, I'm spiritually dead. And then I asked him, well, how do you know you're spiritually dead? If you're dead, you wouldn't know that you're dead. What's thinking about you being spiritually dead? And then he smiled, gave me a hug. And he said, well, I guess I'm just buried alive. So spirit is very, very, very important. Whether, again, we have a religious, theological framework or just awe and feeling. And again, it's connected to every other part of these 8 pillars. Meaning in life. When I've asked people, what's the most important of the 8? The majority have said meaning in life. It's why we wake up in the morning. And Viktor Frankl, who was a pioneer in studying meaning, said that you can find meaning in 3 ways. 1, by creating something. We created this 8-pillar chart. Creating something also creates meaning. We've had last week Herb Ernst on, who is a wonderful intuitive music composer who's created wonderful masterpieces of music. My wife, Willow, is also intuitive musician, harpist, and pianist. And on our YouTube channel, you will find a lot of her pieces of music that you can play at your pleasure. That creates meaning. And you can create artistic things, you can create mechanical things. There's so many ways of creating. We have a need to create. Secondly, Dr. Frankl said that we find meaning by sharing things. So if you sit down and listen to a great piece of music with somebody or watch a good movie with somebody, there's meaning in sharing with others, particularly sharing with people that we love. So that ties in the emotional part, ties in everything. And thirdly, Dr. Frankl said that we can have a positive attitude even in the face of suffering, even in the face of terminal illness. We can choose our attitude. And perhaps that's the only way we can make a choice. A lot of people who are materialistic and feel that everything is determined, when I ask them, well, is your attitude determined? And we get some questions about that. So it's very, very important to focus on meaning in life. One of my favorite books is a very short book called Gratitude by Oliver Sacks. He wrote this book knowing he had about 3 months to live. He was dying of pancreatic cancer. Yet it was one of the most uplifting books I've ever read. Social needs. Human beings need each other. Yesterday, a friend of ours, Jim, we celebrated his 81st birthday, and we were all sitting in the beer garden, just enjoying each other and celebrating Jim's birthday. Social connections are very, very important. We need each other. Ulrich, do you have any social ideas? How do you find your social needs?
Well, in today's world and where I live, the internet is actually a prime focus of making social connections, like this project. But even that, there are elements of that social connection with human beings that's not projected through the internet. You need to have people around you. You need to be able to interact with people. And that's one thing that I do miss, being up here on the mountain and not getting off very often. Sort of reminds me of the character in Independence Day at Area 54, when he comes up and he says, you can see that they don't let us out much. And that's always struck me. I've always enjoyed the company of people, especially people that are thinkers and innovators and that sort of thing. But unfortunately, as we age, our connections with other people begins to diminish, and that's sad. So it's really important to figure out in our lives how to connect with other people, whether it's people that we live with in our houses, in our homes, our neighbors, the brewery. We need to find that human connection, which gives us meaning, which excites our spirit, which gives us positive emotions and keeps our minds fresh and moving. These things are important.
I want to point out also the social connections can also be with our animal friends. I know you have a bunch of animals up there and they keep you busy.
Yeah, this morning I was writing while sitting on the couch, and we have an old dog who has been out in the kennel for years. And finally we let him in, and he's such a happy critter. He came and laid on the couch with me. He's pretty big, and just sort of pushed into me. And that gave me that feeling of here was a connection between me and another living thing. Um, yeah, and if we find ourselves isolated socially with other human beings, we always have the option to have uh, critters in our lives. And sometimes we have to sort of make a choice between having a neat place that smells good or having the critters that make us happy that maybe they make a mess sometimes. It's just, it's choices.
Yeah, we have 5 cats, and my wife and I generally take 2 walks a day around our property, and often several cats will walk with us. So they have social needs too, and they've often come to walk with us even though they were in the middle of stalking a small animal. Once they see us walk, they'll break off and walk with us and want to be carried and loved. They've also found that having a pet reduces one's blood pressure. So we don't want to minimize social connections with pets. And yes, we use FaceTime and Zoom and all these wonderful technological advances, but there's nothing like being with somebody in person. It's social connections are necessary and are helpful in all the other things. Um, Financial, if we're broke, we're not content, or it's an obstacle to contentment. Let me say that. It it can affect all of the other things, your mental health, your physical health. So it's important to pay some attention to our financial needs. They've done many studies and they've shown that there's a sweet spot. There's the sweet spot is you have enough to meet your needs, that you don't worry about shelter, having enough food, having having your bills paid. But then if you have a lot of assets, now you start worrying about keeping them and protecting them. And it could be a distraction to all the other things. I've had a financial career for over 40 years, and many of my clients, unfortunately, are not content, even though they're financially healthy. And that's one of the reasons why I came up with this template. Because what's the use of having great finances if we're discontent? Environment. Environment is where we live. There's a lot of attention right now that the fact that the Secretary General of the United Nations said today it's no longer global warming, it's global boiling, quote unquote, is that our environment affects us greatly. But our day-to-day living environment, where we live, where we sleep, it's important. And Ulrich, tell us a little more about your environment where you live.
Well, I live in the mountains at about 4,000 feet, and the closest neighbor is about a mile, and the closest community or town is 21 miles, roughly. So I'm fairly isolated. I'm at the edge of a forest. I always tell people that my backyard it is composed of 80 million, 80,000 acres of forest land, because we're right next to the national forest, and it's a beautiful place. A couple mornings ago, I had a deer show up right by the door. Having a nice environment, just waking up in the morning and looking into the forest and seeing all the greens and the colors of the sun as it rises over the horizon. Those are all things in our environment that provide us with contentment. You take in a deep breath, and I take in a good gulp of coffee, and what else is there? So,
Good.
but even if you're living in a big city, you can create an environment around you that is conducive to contentment. You can create a nice garden. You can create spaces in your house with books if you're into reading books. I am. Or if you're into cooking, you create a nice space in your kitchen. So have a place where people can sit and talk to you while you're cooking, or they can participate while you're cooking. Those are all important pieces of the environment, and we have lots of choices there. We don't have to try to be content with an environment that's not conducive to contentment or peace.
Okay. I want to share with you some of the epiphanies that I've experienced while pondering the 8 pillars of contentment, and also some calls to action so that we can share ideas on fostering contentment. When I came up with this, I had the mindset that in order to be content, things need to be working right in the 8 areas. And then suddenly I recognized that one can feel contentment even if something's not working right in one or more of the areas. The book I mentioned, Gratitude by Oliver Sacks, was an example. His body was about to cease to exist in a few months. It couldn't be in a worse situation. Yet, he wrote a book by a contented person. So it taught me that being content is not dependent upon the 8 pillars. However, it might be dependent upon being mindful of the 8 pillars, being on the way. So, an emotional problem, a spiritual challenge, a financial problem, all of these things can be obstacles to contentment, but they don't necessarily negate contentment.
It's important to realize that these pillars are not static. They're not non-moving. They're verbs, and it's important to realize that you might have what feels like difficulties in any one of these, but those difficulties are the ones that keep us moving forward. They keep us moving to find, how does this relate to the others? What meaning is so important to me that I can get up in the morning and explore ways to solve the problems and the issues I might be dealing with.
That's right. And we also can use our resources in one of the pillars to help with the other pillars. So if we're having emotional, mental, physical problems, we might be able to draw on our spiritual resources to be able to ameliorate those. So that's why there's a line connecting each one with each other one. I'd like to open a dialogue with the world about how we can foster contentment. And one way is to comment on this video. Please make a comment. Please let us know what you're thinking. We hope to interview a lot of people over the years who expertise is in one of those or more of those pillars. We hope to have more dialogue on how we can achieve, or not achieve necessarily, be content. It's our theory that contented people don't harm others, that contented people actually help others. And being content is a good thing. The other epiphany that I've had is that I focused a lot on meaning in study of Viktor Frankl and logotherapy, which is a study of our meaning. And often the word meaning is coupled with purpose, meaning and purpose. And I thought a lot about that. And what about a bank robber whose purpose is to steal $1 million? And that's what has meaning to the bank robber. So purpose is, yes, it's important, but I think meaning and contentment pair better. And that if we have meaning in life, we can find contentment even when things are challenging in all the other areas. So that's the other thing that I've thought about a lot, is pairing meaning and contentment. And that's going to be the title on the YouTube video. Hopefully people will catch on and listen to it. If you would like a PDF copy of this chart, you can email me at thevoiceofmeaning, all one word, at gmail.com. And I'll be able to attach this a PDF and send it right back to you. No cost, no charge. Let's hear from you. You can go ahead.
So one of our intentions is to create engagement in these areas, getting both in conversation and in thinking. So one question I have that maybe sort of the prime the pump and get things started is the connection between mind and environment. And since the world seems to be dealing with some fairly extreme environmental issues, the degree to that depends on where we live. Part of the degree to that depends on our political stance. Those are all part of the big picture here. But how does the environment that you are a part of, whether it's your home, whether it's your community, whether it's your country and world, how does that affect our mind, how we think, what we think? So that's just, I throw that out just sort of the prime the pump and get people to think. Share your thoughts with us. And by sharing your thoughts with us, you share it with other listeners. And again, our hope is to produce engagement and get people to start thinking. There is no one answer to any of these questions. That's what's the beauty of this. But by sharing our perspective, we help others dig deeper into their perspective.
So also call to action, please subscribe to our YouTube channel. Once we have 100 subscribers, YouTube will enable us to put on some more tools to be able to share more things and hyperlinks and et cetera, et cetera. And once we hit 500 subscribers, then we're on the map. And if you click on the little bell, then you'll be automatically notified of upcoming videos. It's our intention to publish an interview at least once a week. Also, lots of intuitive music that Willow has been gracious to provide to us. Also, Herb Ernst has an entire library of music that's accessible on thevoiceofmeaning.com. Also, if you go to www.thevoiceofmeaning.com, you can find all of the videos that you can listen to or watch. Next week I'll be interviewing Ulrich to continue with his just incredibly fascinating life story. The following week we have Bill Minch, Tom Minch's son, who's had an extraordinary career himself and has produced an amazing documentary. And we will have more to come. So again, we're asking for your help and support, not money, just showing up, just being
So,
part of the
subscribe to us, because we're cute old guys, and or maybe you're engaged with the ideas that we are bringing up and talking about. So become part of the conversation.
Okay, until later, thank you for joining us. All the best to everyone, and may everyone feel contentment.